This is all a ritual that Antonio Brown is being put through. This is what they call an embarrassment ritual. This is part of his self-destruct programming. But he was checked out for a tune-up when he was placed under psychiatric evaluation.
All right, hold on, gentlemen, hold on. I understand you're both here. I don't want you tag teaming on this. We need these proceedings to go smoothly. This is only a first appearance hearing. We have a large docket to get through. I understand the allegations are very serious, and I understand everything surrounding this case, but...
She said that the allegations are very serious. Antonio Brown, at least allegedly, got into a little dust-up with the moving guy. I'm sure that there are people within that room who have far more serious allegations than Antonio Brown, but once again, they are going to stress whatever the issue is that they have with Antonio Brown until he's brought back under control.
It's still a first appearance court, and we're not going to turn this into a full-on testimonial hearing where everyone's presenting evidence to make a legal argument. It's not going to happen this morning.
So the whole thing went roughly a half an hour where they were going back and forth. Again, this thing was supposed to last less than 60 seconds. Yeah, so bond was ultimately set at $110,000. Antonio posted bond, and then when he left the jail Friday morning, he didn't just walk out. He literally sprinted down the jail steps and ran into the street while wearing a suit that looks like a Las Vegas lounge act from 1987. Watch this video.
That way. Run to the right, Antonio. You're running the wrong way.
So that's where we are now with Antonio Brown.
Even the media guy had to tell Antonio Brown, you're running the wrong way. Hey, Antonio, we took photos of your car before they let you out. We know where you're parked. You have to run to the right, not to the left, guy.
Wild week for him. He was arrested. Now all this is going down. I mean, how does this end up?
I have a problem with this, Ed.
What's that?
Because we've talked...
Once again, as we can see here, just looking at how he's attired, he has the verdant green. He is the quote-unquote god of vegetation and fertility. He also has the blue, or the quote-unquote turquoise blue, to show that he's the quote-unquote god of the sea and of the land. He has the image of the heart with the arrow going through it. He is the boy god Heru, or Harpocrates. He's the god of mischief. We're going to be delving into some of these symbols in the aftermath or in the epilogue of this video.
This case for a couple of days. We have witnesses that said what happened. I feel like he's being overcharged.
And as we saw once again, he threw up the so-called horned hand sign, or the hang ten hand sign, what he calls the quote-unquote call god. That's the hand sign for the bull god, or the horned quote-unquote entity that he worships, also known as the Baphomet.
And I feel like the prosecutors are trying to make an example out of him because he berated the cops outside of his house. I do believe that Antonio Brown did a crime. I think that's fairly certain. I don't think not wanting him to have bond because he threw a rock at a truck.
But it's the burglary with the salt. That's a felony. It's a
That's what I'm saying, Mike. That's what I'm saying, Mike. I think that's an overcharge for that. I think if this is anybody else.
Well, I have to stop you for a moment. Number one, brother, no disrespect. Your voice is a little shrill. But number two, there's no such thing as a real overcharge when the police have already decided that you're an enemy to them. Everyone knows that the police department in whatever city you're in as a so-called black man is an entity that you have to be wary of, and that you have to be as cordial with as possible so that you can avoid dumb shit. Antonio Brown decided that he was going to inflame the cops as much as possible. So now he has to expect that he is an enemy of the judicial system within his district. That's just a part of it. When you go left, they're going to go even more left. But just to take it a bit deeper, once again, it's very clear that this is a part of a ritual for Antonio Brown, and they're going to try to get him to fall back in line in some way, shape, or form, or they're just going to write him out of the script. We just saw it happen this past weekend with Kobe Bryant. I've suspected for a while that they might do it with Colin Kaepernick, especially if he continues to act erratically and his handler, Ness Nitty, cannot rein him back in. And they may do it with Antonio Brown. He had a major blow up with his wife. With most of these assets, their wives are their handlers. So once they kick the wife to the curb, it's normally only a matter of time before they rein them in some way, shape, or form, or quote-unquote suicide them.
Besides Antonio Brown, and the exact same thing happened, they walk out of court maybe on their own recognizance. Yeah. I just think because of what happened previously with him and police officers, they tried to find the highest charge that they can do for the least amount of stuff that actually happened. That's my opinion on it. In a sense, it's kind of
You have the right to your opinion, brother, but once again, I mean, when you make bad decisions in life, you empower those who never liked you in the first place.
Oh, right. If you piss off all of law enforcement in your area and now they have an opportunity to kind of get you, it sounds like they're doing that.
Yeah, but
Ding, basically.
I got a problem with both you guys saying that. So now we're questioning their integrity.
What integrity? When have the police force ever utilized integrity as a prime mover in how they utilize or how they execute whatever their strategies are or whatever their intent is? I don't think that integrity is something that is intrinsic within the police force. At the end of the day, they're garbage collectors for human beings. So if that means that they have to plant drugs or plant guns or, write up fake warrants for arrest, it is what it is. I focus on people like Antonio Brown because it's very clear to me who he is and what he is. And it's becoming clearer and clearer as his narrative has gone along. I pretty much have known that he was an agent of chaos from the start. And when I saw the 2 goat rings, I knew that he was a Luciferian. Now it's becoming abundantly clear that Luciferianism is an important component of his programming.
Proven to be off his rocker here is Antonio Brown.
Let me ask you a question though, right? Because it is a $110,000 bond and all that stuff, but the allegations are that he physically assaulted a moving truck driver. But if you look at the police report, it says that the injuries that he allegedly sustained were scratches.
Right. I do agree with you guys on that. I think ultimately,
that's why I laughed when the quote unquote judge who heard his court hearing claimed that the charges were so serious. I mean, give me a break.
Should be reduced to something that's a misdemeanor, because with all the people that all of us have spoken.
Once again, on the front of the truck is 777, and on the trailer with the orange background is 888. So it's very clear that they're trying to program Antonio Brown to believe that he's some type of quote unquote Christ figure.
Doesn't sound like this guy was injured very badly.
My issue, Mike, is simply if the same thing happened and it wasn't Antonio Brown,
would the average guy in Hollywood,
would they get the same, charges?
And
I don't believe that.
On that, but to say that with any degree of certainty, it's just it can't happen. We have no idea.
Like I said, it's my opinion that if this was you or Evan that did this, the charges would be different. I just feel that's the case. I feel like.
Right, but brother, what are you really saying? What you're saying is that if Antonio Brown had not antagonized the cops, that maybe they would not have given him such harsh charges. Do you really think that what you're saying is deep or insightful? It's pretty obvious. The moral of the story is don't antagonize the police. Should that not be the moral of the story? Or should we say, we should be able to just throw a fit and act a fool and not expect any repercussions? I mean, come on, man.
There's enough historical and societal evidence to prove that if this was someone that was not Antonio Brown, someone that hadn't berated the cops, that there's no way that they would charge him with something that would get bond. We have seen people commit violent crimes with firearms, with knives, sexual assault, get bail. They did not want him to have bond on this.
Okay, this brother, he's trying to go to wokity angle. At the end of the day, once again, so-called black man, we need to have our own society so we don't have to concern ourselves with the constant comparative game. Until the so-called black man is ready to rule, he's always going to think that he's making insightful points by trying to win over Caucasian people into believing that he's not being treated fair. They already know that the so-called black man does not get treated quote-unquote fair or equal. This is not our society. This is not our rest. From a bigger perspective, who is Antonio Brown really? What is going on within his spirit and within the various compartments of his mind that have him spazzing out like this? That's what I'm more interested in, not in winning over Caucasian people with wokety woke talk. That's nonsense.
Understand that, but we have to understand too that this cuts both ways. Antonio Brown has been accused of rape and has never been charged criminally for that. So
he's never been charged criminally because even the police department knows that they have no case. Even the police department knows that the woman's accusations are groundless. So that's why he has not been charged with any form of rape or anything like that. And the NFL really had Antonio Brown cooled his jets and just went along with the program. He probably could have been playing with and for the Patriots the last 5 or 6 games of the season, but instead he decided that he wanted to be an agent of chaos.
You're not supposed to impose punishment for previous things when you're trying to prosecute for this one thing.
But what we're doing here is we're assuming because he's Antonio Brown that they overcharged him. That's why I don't agree.
That's accurate. Why would that not be accurate? Why is that an issue? What this guy in the middle, Babcock, is saying is just as absurd as the wokety Negro at the bottom left. The wokety Negro at the bottom left is incensed because the police actually overcharged Antonio Brown for being an asshole to them. And the quote-unquote conservative Caucasian in the middle, Mike Babcock, he's incredulous that anyone would accuse the police of levying heavier charges on someone who's been giving them a hard time. Like, of course they would. They do that all the time.
I'm not saying it's a fact. What I'm saying is I think there's strong evidence that because of what happened with the cops previously, they were not going to charge him as if they had never known him before.
It's their job to oppressively charge him. They know who Antonio Brown is, or at least high-level ranking officers within that police department and that judge, they know who and what Antonio Brown is. Please understand that all judges are bankers. So they look at all people, not just monarch-controlled assets, but all people as financial assets. It's about how much money can they make from you. That's the point of arresting you in the first place. That's why you get charged. A charge is a bill that you have to pay. And a judge gets the cut of that bill when you pay it.
Didn't have the situation with the cops previously. I think you have a hard time saying that if this happened to Antonio Brown, and this was just the first time.
Once again, Antonio Brown in the dark green getup. Of course, that standard issue within the holding facility that he's at. But still, the green coloring is meant to represent him as the quote-unquote god of fertility. He is Tammuz or Adonis.
Never had this story and talked about him. Everything had been great for the last month, and he would have got the same charges. That's just my opinion.
There's one more thing I want to talk about before we move on to the next segment.
And Tammuz or Adonis, by the way, are another name for Heru. And Heru is who the entity is that is represented by the 777. That is the quote-unquote god of the entertainment industry, or at least in one of its manifestations, by the many Crowleyites that are within the entertainment industry.
That's Antonio's attire here. He's wearing something that the officials call an anti-suicide smock. And the only assumption based on when you watch this video and you see other people accused of crime in the background and they're wearing your standard traditional jumpsuit, except for that one guy in stripes, by the way. That looks like something out of like the 1920s. Right there.
Seriously.
But you see Antonio Brown, it looks like a bulletproof vest. It's an anti-suicide smock. And I would imagine that the reason that he has that, I think the reasonable assumption is that they believe that he might be a danger to himself or others, and so.
Well, they understand that he's going through self-destruct programming, so they have to make sure that at least to the outside world, they've done their best to protect Antonio Brown. But I'm pretty sure that he most likely was debriefed when he was subjected to psychiatric evaluation.
Giving him the usual
And when I say debriefed, I'm talking about a handler who has his access codes and understands what to say to him to make him relatively inert. And able to be reprogrammed, deprogrammed, sent back out into the public.
Give him this, which in itself is troubling in addition to all the other stuff that's going on.
I don't think it's necessarily indicative of Antonio's mindset. I think this is the standard procedure when you have somebody who is famous and wealthy, who is now behind bars, and that's a big change, a big fall from grace. So I think that's why he was given that.
And just one last thing. The one thing I do agree with is the judge said he has to get a mental health evaluation.
Yes, in other words, the judge is mandating that Antonio Brown report to an MK handler who has access to many of his altars and his triggers, his access codes per se, just to make sure that everything is going how it's supposed to go. They're going to finish this Antonio Brown storyline very soon in some way, shape, or form.
That's really the only thing that they should have been arguing about, was that the bail, in my mind, the bond shouldn't have been as high as it was. They shouldn't be arguing for no bond. I think Antonio Brown needs help, not incarceration.
Okay, so now, brothers, this was some very interesting footage that I caught on Antonio Brown's Instagram page. He decided that he was going to make a show or a ritual of him hanging one of the depictions of his god, the goat god Pan, up on the wall in his personal gym. Okay, so now brothers, in this epilogue, I'm just going to go over a few pictorials in order to provide some context pertaining to many of the statements that I made in the video about Mr. Antonio Brown going through his MK Ultra breakdown. At first, I wasn't quite sure. I already knew that he was a Luciferian, but it's difficult to make that leap over to the MK Ultra aspect unless I see certain signs. That being other forces utilizing numerology or certain symbols in concert with Antonio Brown in order to craft a fake reality, what's known as a script or a storyline around his personage or his character per se. So there's very little doubt in my mind right now that Antonio Brown is being put through what's known as self-destruct programming. And as we can see here in this photo, and I did a video about this a long time ago when he first purchased those 2 gold rings, and notice where he put them on his index finger and on his pinky, to show you that when he does the horn god salute of throwing up both of those fingers, he knows exactly what he's doing. When he uses that term goat, it has nothing to do with greatest of all time. He's saluting the goat god Pan. And that's the reason why he's conducting himself in the way that he is. He's under programming. The veneration of the goat god is one of the subcomponents of that programming within the MK Ultra program. Here's a close-up of his fingers. As we can see, he does indeed have the 2 gold rings on his fingers. This was around the time when he was causing a lot of chaos trying to get out of Pittsburgh. I'm not quite sure if the head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers is an MK handler himself, or maybe he is and just was not strong enough to maintain control over Antonio Brown. Who knows? And then on top of that, he has to worry about that rapist, Ben Roethlisberger, or alleged rapist. So now, brothers, these are various images that are found on Antonio Brown's Instagram page. He goes out of his way to always show pictures of goats or some type of goat symbolism because he very clearly venerates the goat god. Here's the first one, as we can see here, the quote-unquote goat face. Here's him throwing up the quote-unquote goat hand sign. He has both his index finger and his pinky finger polished with black nail polish, showing you that he is a witch. Once again, another photo showing off his 2 goat rings on both the index finger and the pinky finger. It's very clear that Mr. Antonio Brown gives most of the credit for his NFL success to the quote-unquote goat god, or the god of witches, Pan. Notice at the bottom it says, "Free the goat." He's trying to act as if he's talking about himself, but he's actually talking about Pan. He says it here again, "Free the goat," with the goat ring on, of course focused on the goat head. Here's another photo, once again Mr. Antonio Brown glorifying his goat rings. Here's him at dinner, making sure that he takes a photo of whatever it is that he's about to eat with both of his goat rings right by his dinner plate. So he's unabashed about it. So now, brothers, this is an old photo that I've shown previously of Mr. Le'Veon Bell, the former superstar running back. He played with the Pittsburgh Steelers. He's now currently with the New York Jets. I'm sure that he's hoping to be traded, but as we can see here, he is a quote-unquote illuminist or a Luciferian. He's throwing up the horn hand signs for the bull god. So he himself has knowledge of the craft system. He's most likely in some type of fraternity. A lot of these brothers who are in these fraternal orders, they're not quite sure what it is that they're a part of. Some of them know, but most of them don't. Here's Antonio Brown throwing up the same hand sign. I'm not quite sure if he's a member of a fraternity, but as I've already displayed, it's very clear that Antonio Brown is in the know. And I have very little doubt that one of the main reasons why he has a more in-depth knowledge of what he's associated with when he throws up those hand signs is because not only does he use the goat imagery, But we're going to see some other things later on in this epilogue to show Antonio Brown is an illuminist. He's someone who understands the craft on a very deep level. And I do believe that it's because he was subjected to the MK Ultra mind control programming to make him a quote-unquote monarch athlete. So, brothers, here's Mr. Robert De Niro throwing up that same hand sign in a promotional photo for Godfather Part 2. Of course, as you know, he plays the young Vito Corleone, the father of Michael Corleone. And Robert is just signaling all his fellow witches out there to let them know, I'm a part of your brotherhood, I'm a part of your clique. And let's also understand that the Godfather films were about the mafia. And the mafia has their origins in masonry. When you brothers get the chance, look up Mr. Giuseppe Mazzini, one of the foremost masons during the latter part or the mid part of the 1800s. He was a contemporary, if I remember correctly, of Mr. Albert Pike. And he was one of the founders of the organizational structure of the mafia. And he's the reason why they perform many of the rituals that they still perform to this day. Any global organization, and the mafia is a global organization, operates according to the energies of Luciferianism. I don't care whether it's in the government or organized crime, the sports world, etc. So now, brothers, right here, Antonio Brown says, God is greatest, make a wish. This is something that you'll notice amongst a lot of these celebrities. They're trying to push that notion of 1111, or that idea of 1111 equaling God on the masses. What 1111 represents is mind activation. What they're talking about is quote-unquote Christ consciousness, which has nothing to do with the Christ of the Bible. It's in reference to Heru or Tammuz. They're trying to obfuscate the idea of the Christ of the Bible with the Horus or the Heru of the Babylonian Kemetic Mystery School system, also known as Adonis or Tammuz. Right here, brothers, he's showing you who his quote-unquote real God is. As we can see on his shirt is a stylized Ankh, which is the Kemetic symbol for quote-unquote life, really sex magic. It's talking about how the divine child, or Heru, also known as Tammuz, sprung forth from the divine delta, or the divine doorway, aka the vagina of Isis or Aset. That's what the Ankh is. And that's the reason why everyone in the Mediterranean area, and even heading into India and parts of the Middle East, when they were sacrificially killed, there normally was a cross involved, because you were being sacrificed to feed into the life force of Tammuz, to bring him back, to conjure him back. They're still waiting for his return. For example, in that film series, The Lord of the Rings is talking about Saturn. The third film in that series is called Return of the King. They're talking about the Lion King. That's why you have the film of that name as well. The Lion King is who? Horus or Heru. Also notice that the second film in that series was titled what? The Two Towers. The Two Towers, they represent the twin pillars, the doorway that is created so that he can come through from the other dimension. It's a portal. I cover a lot of those concepts in the series that I did on the Joker. But just getting back to the point, Antonio Brown is a Luciferian, as we can see here. Now, brothers, this was another photograph that I found on his Instagram that I found very interesting. Antonio Brown is always rambling about white people and crackers per se. But every time you turn around in his backyard, there are at least 10 to 15, maybe 20 so-called white people, what he calls crackers, filming him and laughing with him. Brothers, do not be surprised if many of the members, or at least the Caucasian members of his quote-unquote entourage, are actually just handlers or watchers who are there to moderate him and make sure that he continues down his path. It's very clear to me that Antonio Brown not only is a part of the craft, but he's also part of the program, if you get my drift. So once again, do not be surprised if many of these faces that you see in the background are members of certain agencies that are there to preside over the asset. Brothers, I caught this on his Instagram and I almost couldn't believe it. I said, wow, this person definitely has been programmed with. I'm not going to say he necessarily has, but he's definitely been programmed with a very intimate knowledge of the craft, because as we can see on Antonio Brown's ceiling is the cube of Saturn and the quote-unquote star of Saturn as well. You see that? Here's a better photo of it. This is on the ceiling at Antonio Brown's home. For those of you who don't know, Saturn, or Capricorn or Capricornus, is the horned goat, or the horned goat god. And the cube of Saturn is supposed to represent the source of all life. It's also known as Metatron's cube. They also call it the quote-unquote flower of life, but that's a whole other video for another day. But this was depicted on the ceiling, or this is depicted on the ceiling of Antonio Brown's home. Once again, there he goes. So it's very clear that there's a lot more than meets the eye when it comes to this Antonio Brown narrative. So now, brothers, I just want to address something that I touched on in the main video, that being the 777 inscription on the moving truck. I want to address that first before I move on to the other number that I saw on the trailer of the truck. But let's get to the point. The number 777 represents what they call the flaming sword, or the teaching serpent, also known as Horus or Heru. But let's prove that, and let's also prove that that number 777 has been repeatedly exalted by many of the top witches in Hollywood for a very long time, most likely right under the noses of a lot of people that favor these quote-unquote celebrities. So, brothers, most of these numerological concepts that we see cryptically taught to the masses through celebrities are based in what they're taught in their teachings on the Kabbalah, or the Kabbalistic tree of life. So it states here, 777 as lightning flash of creation. If we trace a path from Kether to Malkuth on the tree of life, following the order of the Sephiroth, we draw the lightning flash of creation, also known as the flaming sword. The counterpart of the flaming sword is the serpent of wisdom, which climbs the tree of life in the order of the paths. So, brothers, to make a long story short, what they're basically letting you know is that the number 777 represents the teachings of the quote-unquote saviors to humanity that you might know as Prometheus, or any of these other demigod or god figures as they're taught in pagan mythology, who discovered fire per se, or are gods of lightning like Thor or Zeus or Jupiter or Agni in the Hindu belief system. Anytime you see a quote-unquote god who's known as a god of fire or lightning, it's actually in reference to spiritual lightning, meaning either enlightenment of the brain or of the mind or of the body, or what they call Christ consciousness. In other words, that entity is who taught mankind to be as gods. He is the left-hand version of Christ. He's the quote-unquote savior of humanity. You understand that? So that's what 777 is in reference to. It's in reference to Heru, or Tammuz, or Adonis. But let's go a little bit further. It says here, the flaming sword or lightning flash of creation. What we're looking at here is what they call the quote-unquote tree of life. It's actually talking about the tree of knowledge, but they call it the tree of life. And as we can see here, that red line represents what they just called the lightning flash of creation, or the flaming sword, when it's going down from the crown to the base. When it's coming up from the base to the crown, they call it the serpent of wisdom, also known as the Kundalini effect in some of the yoga or Buddhist teachings. But it's all pretty much the same thing. So now, brothers, they're going to go a bit further. It states here, 777 as the house of quote-unquote God. But when they use the term God, they're talking about Heru or Horus. Let's see what it says here. It says, the image at the left is the hieroglyph of Ahathor. It is composed of two words. The box that encloses the bird and has the little box in one corner is the word Het, meaning house or temple. The drawing of a falcon inside the box is the word Heru, Hor or Horus, symbolic of the sun god. Together they represent the house of Horus, Het-Hor, or Ahathor. Horus's house is the midday sky. So in other words, when it says the midday sky, is referencing his mother, Hathor. Hathor is the expanse of the sky. She is the habitation. So the number 777 represents, basically, to make a long story short, it represents Hathor and her child/husband Heru. And you might see these themes in many movies, like for example, and I might be going through this film later on. I'm definitely going to be going through this film in correlation with the events that transpired regarding Mr. Kobe Bryant's demise. But overall, I might go through this film. It's the Will Smith movie Hancock, which basically was the symbolic retelling of the tale of Heru and his mother/wife Hathor, played by Charlize Theron. But once again, just to get back to the point, the number 777, that's what it represents. It represents Horus or Heru and Hathor, his mother/wife. So just moving on, it states Aleister Crowley's comment on 220, such and such, his little book, the Book of the Law. It says here, points to the sum 359 plus 418 equals 777. Iwas, in the persona of Rahor Kuit, declares, there is a splendor in my name, hidden and glorious, as the son of midnight is ever the sun. So that also goes to the concept that I tell you brothers about, talking about the dark night, or the dark night rises. Another term for Horus or Heru was the son of midnight. It's talking about the so-called dark night. You understand that? So Horus is both the Joker, or Heru I should say is both the Joker and the quote-unquote Batman or the Dark Knight. But just as I was reading here, the number 359 represents Horus and the number 418 represents his mother Hathor. When you combine them or add them, it makes 777. But let's read down here because it's something very important. It's a very important admission, especially for you brothers who might get confronted by these Kemet cats who want to go back and forth about how Christ is really Heru and all this other stuff. Look at the admission from one of the great scribes and professors of the knowledge of Kemet, Aleister Crowley. And I'm sure a lot of so-called black dudes will say, what are you talking about? That white man doesn't. Please. He was a far greater investigator of the cultures and the understandings of and the teachings of the people of Kemet than any of these wokety niggas out here today. But let's see what he says here. Crowley's original comment on this verse was, perhaps refers to the addition of the name to 418. The secret name of Horus is Satan, 359. The son of midnight is Ra Kepra. The sun is 777 and represents spirit incarnated. The spirit is 359. The body, temple, or house is 418. So when you add those two together, it makes 777. I touched on that concept of the dung beetle, or the beetle that rolls the ball of dung, representing the sun, or Kepri, or Kepra, the name of that quote-unquote Kemetic god, in one of those R. Kelly videos. Because his logo for his company, Blackground, basically was a metaphorical reimagining of the divine sun beetle pushing the sun across the sky, because like all the other top entertainers, he's a Luciferian as well. But I just wanted to get to the point. 777 is talking about Heru, and Heru is actually just Satan, or the adversary per se. So brothers, let's get a bit more understanding on the concept of 777, especially the part about the house, which equals 418. It says the prophet's house, and when he uses the term prophet, he's talking about Horus or Heru. The prophet's house is named 418. 418 is also the Hebrew letter Het, whose spelling sums to 418. Het is the letter attributed to the tarot trump card, the Chariot, the sign Cancer in the zodiac, which marks the beginning of summer. Cancer is ruled by the moon. The lunar influence can be seen in the curved horns of Ahathor. So in other words, he's showing you that the house of Horus, once again, is talking about the mother goddess theme, because the mother goddess is always associated or aligned with the moon. Every once in a while, they'll align a male deity with the moon, but in this case, it's talking about the mother goddess because she is the habitation or the divine habitation. It states here, opposite Cancer on the other side of the zodiac is the earth sign Capricorn, ruled by Saturn, the winter solstice when the sun is below the horizon for the longest night of the year. Capricorn is the astrological attribute of the tarot trump card, the devil. So brothers, once again, even in the Aleister Crowley teachings, they understand who the goat is, or what the goat is, and what it's meant to represent or imply, that being the quote-unquote devil. And as we've already read, Horus or Heru is Satan. That's in their belief system, in the Crowleyite belief system. So when you encounter these brothers that's trying to push the goat god, and they tell you it's okay, and Horus or Heru, they're trying to get you to bow the knee to Satan. That's it. Let them go about their business. Most of these guys are finished, man. They're done. But let me read on here. I'm going to jump down a little bit. Yule, or Saturnalia, is the festival of the midnight of the year, even in its corruption as Christmas. 777 is the child of midnight and a symbol of reincarnation. Why is that, brothers? Because Heru is the reincarnation of who? Asar or Osiris, also known as Saturn. You understand? Saturn is the quote-unquote goat god Capricorn or Capricornus. That's why if you ever look up the Kemetic horned quote-unquote deity or the goat deity Khnum, they'll tell you that Khnum is the Ba or the spirit of Asar or Osiris. But anyway, just reading on. 359 is spirit expressed through cycles of life. 418 is the material plane temple in which the spirit experiences manifestation in time and space. All right, that's pretty much it. I might address this article a little bit later in another video, but I got to the point already. That's what 777 is about. 777 represents Heru, or as Crowley himself acknowledged, Satan, also known as the quote-unquote goat. So brothers, here's a close-up of that 777 on the truck one more time. Once again, that was for Heru. So brothers, here's a photo of the famous / infamous pop star and quote-unquote singer Rihanna. And as we can see here, she has a very intimate understanding of the number 777 and what it actually represents. A few years ago, she had a tour called the 777 Tour, which as usual was another subliminal attempt to not only help the masses understand what the energies are that galvanize the elite, the quote-unquote elite of this world, but also to show those in the know that she's fully immersed in the system, the Babylonian Kemetic Mystery School system. That's what it's about. That's what it's always been about. For you to get to a high enough level or high enough totem in the world that we don't see, you have to submit to the teachings of the craft, bottom line. So now, brothers, right here is this little rap dude that all the wokety woke Negroes get upset about if anybody says anything about him, Mr. Kendrick Lamar. And as we can see here, he has on the black, white, and the red for Pan. And what does he have on his jersey here? 777. He is a Crowleyite. I'm going to get to him in due time. Brothers, I also wanted to address the 888 that was visible on the trailer of the quote-unquote moving truck. This number represents quote-unquote Christ, at least according to many of the Kabbalistic teachings. It represents Christ. So it's clear to me that they're trying to promote some type of symbolic antipathy between Heru and Christ in the mind of Antonio Brown. As we can see, the 888 has a background of orange to denote quote-unquote Christ consciousness or something along those lines. These are all triggers for Antonio Brown. Here's a close-up of the number 888. So let's find out what that number means. So brothers, it states here, in Christian numerology, whatever that means. Don't get it twisted. I mean, there are numbers that have a symbolic meaning in the scriptures. Everybody knows that. But whenever I see text like this, to me, it always seems to me to be an attempt at obfuscation or, to correlate different systems, but that's neither here nor there. Let's read what it says. In Christian numerology, the number 888 represents Jesus, or sometimes more specifically Christ the Redeemer. The representation of 888 may be justified either through gematria, by counting the letter values of the Greek transliteration of Jesus' name, or as an opposing value to 666, the number of the beast. So once again, brothers, at least according to their system, Christ is represented by the number 888. And as we saw in those two photos, the front of the truck had 777 on it for Heru. The trailer had 888. So were they trying to cause some type of triggering within the mind of Antonio Brown? Maybe that's what caused him to go off. Who knows? Because even symbols, numbers, letters, colors can be a trigger to someone who's under the program.